The Great Council Chamber was buzzing with noise as beings from 47 different worlds gathered for their monthly meeting. Ambassador Quan stood at the center podium, his dark blue uniform clean and pressed despite the long journey from Earth. Around him, creatures of all shapes and sizes talked in their own languages, while machines translated their words into sounds everyone could understand. Quan looked around the massive room. The Vorthak representative was there with his long tentacles moving slowly through the air. The crystal beings called Nexari were making soft musical sounds as they talked. Giant insect-like creatures from the Corvan Empire clicked their claws against their seats. Some beings floated in tanks of green liquid, while others stood on 4 or 6 legs. The chamber itself was impressive. It was built inside a space station that orbited no planet and belonged to no single world. The walls were made of some material that looked like glass, but was stronger than steel. Through them, Quan could see the stars and the ships of many worlds docked at the station. Speaker. Vextar called for quiet by raising one of his sharp arms. He was tall and looked like a giant praying mantis with compound eyes that reflected light from all directions. His voice came through the translation system as a deep rumble that everyone could understand. Ambassador Quan of the Human Federation, Vextar said, "You have asked to speak to the Council today. What matter brings you before us?" Quan took a deep breath and began to speak. His words were calm and clear. "Honored members of the Galactic Council, I come to you today with a request. That may seem strange. The Human Federation asks that you ban all humans from taking part in any galactic wars or conflicts." The reaction was immediate. Laughter filled the chamber from dozens of different species. The Vorthak made a sound like water bubbling. The Nexari chimed like broken bells. The Corvan clicked their mandibles in what passed for amusement among their kind. Even the floating creatures in their tanks seemed to shake with mirth. The noise was so loud that the translation machines struggled to keep up. Some beings were slapping their knees, or whatever they used for knees. Others were making gestures. That meant humor in their cultures. A few were actually rolling on the floor. Quan waited patiently for the laughter to die down. He had expected this reaction. Humans had been fighting in galactic wars for over 100 years. They were known as some of the best soldiers in the galaxy. The idea of banning them seemed like a joke. Representative Thal from the Corvan Empire stood up. He had 4 arms, and each one was as thick as a tree trunk. His species were known as great warriors who lived for battle. "Ambassador Quan," Thal said in his grinding voice, "surely you jest with us. Your species has been our most eager fighters. For a century, you have ended 12 wars and stopped 3 attempts at genocide. Why would we ban our best soldiers?" Other voices joined in from around the chamber. The Nexari representative sang out, "Human soldiers follow all our rules. They use approved weapons. They respect the laws of war. What could be wrong with this?" A floating being in a green tank added, "Humans are valuable assets in warfare. They adapt quickly. They work well with other species. They get results." The Vorthak representative waved his tentacles and spoke in his bubbling voice. In the Rigel campaign, human forces saved over 2 million civilians. In the Centauri conflict, they prevented a planetary bombardment. Why ban such effective peacekeepers? Quan listened to all the comments. He nodded respectfully to each speaker. When the voices died down, he spoke again. "With great respect to all council members, I believe there are things about human warfare that you have not seen. Things that the council should know before making any decisions about our future role in galactic conflicts." Speaker Vextar tilted, his insect head to one side. "What things could we not have seen? Human forces have fought alongside troops from many of our worlds. We have access to all battle reports. Our observers have been present at most human military operations." "That is true," Quan replied. But battle reports do not show everything. Observer reports focus on results, not methods. I have brought footage from recent human military operations that I believe will help the Council understand why we make this request. The chamber grew quieter. A few beings leaned forward in their seats. Others adjusted their position to get a better view of the hologram projector in the center of the room. A representative from the peaceful Altair system raised a graceful hand. Ambassador Quan, are you saying that humans have been hiding something from us? That you have broken the laws of war? No, Quan said firmly. Humans have followed all galactic laws of warfare. We have used only approved weapons. We have respected all rules of engagement. We have treated prisoners according to galactic conventions. But there are aspects of how humans fight that may not be compatible with the Council's vision of civilized warfare. The Corvin representative Thol laughed again. Incompatible? Your soldiers are disciplined. They follow orders. They complete missions. They protect civilians. What could be incompatible about this? Quan touched a control pad on the podium. The hologram projector hummed to life, casting a blue glow throughout the chamber. I have prepared 3 recordings from recent conflicts involving human forces. I believe these will show what I mean better than words can explain. Several beings shifted in their seats. The crystal Nexari changed color slightly, which meant they were curious. The Vorthak stopped moving their tentacles and focused all their attention on the center of the room. Speaker Vextar made a gesture with one clawed hand. Very well, Ambassador. Show us these recordings. Though I suspect the Council will still deny your request. Human soldiers are far too valuable to restrict. They have been crucial in maintaining peace across the galaxy. The lights in the chamber dimmed automatically as the hologram projector prepared to display the first recording. Around the room, beings settled into their seats or positions. Some had to adjust their breathing apparatus or communication devices. Quan looked around the chamber one more time before activating the first recording. He could see curiosity on the faces and features of dozens of different species. They expected to see more evidence of human efficiency and bravery. They expected to see why humans should continue to serve as galactic peacekeepers. The first recording, Quan said quietly, is from 6 months ago on the mining world of Kepler 442b. A group of Zephyrian raiders had been taking colonists as slaves. A standard human unit was sent to stop them and rescue the captured civilians. He pressed. Another control, and the hologram sprang to life, showing a dusty battlefield under an orange sky. Human soldiers in standard combat gear were visible, moving in perfect formation across the rocky landscape. Their weapons fired controlled bursts of energy at targets in the distance. As you can see, Quan continued, the human forces followed. All standard protocols. They advanced in regulation formation. They used approved plasma weapons. They maintained proper communication with their command unit. This is exactly what you would expect to see from any professional military force in the galaxy. The beings in the chamber watched with mild interest. This was exactly what they had seen in hundreds of battle reports over the years. Disciplined soldiers doing their job efficiently and professionally. But Quan's expression was troubled as he watched the footage. This first part of the recording shows the standard engagement. But something changed when the human unit discovered where the slaves were being held. I want the Council to pay very close attention to what happens next. The hologram continued to play, showing the human soldiers approaching a series of metal buildings built into the rocky hillside. Everything still looked normal and routine, but Quan knew that what came next would change everything the Council thought they knew about human warfare. The hologram showed the human soldiers reaching the metal buildings where the slaves were kept. The footage was clear and sharp, recorded by military cameras mounted on the soldiers' helmets. Everything looked normal as the squad leader made hand signals to his team. Then they opened the first door. The change in the humans was immediate and shocking. One moment they were professional soldiers following standard procedures. The next moment they had become something else entirely. something that made several alien representatives lean back in their seats with surprise. Sergeant Hyun was the first through the door. The camera captured his face clearly as he saw what was inside. The expression that crossed his features was unlike anything the council members had seen before. It was not anger or rage. It was something much more frightening. It was the look of a predator that had found its prey. Inside the building were dozens of human colonists chained to the walls, men, women, and children who had been taken from their homes and farms. Many showed signs of abuse and starvation. Some were barely conscious. The youngest children were crying softly. The Zephyrian guards in the building turned to face the human soldiers. The Zephyrians were large creatures, nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin and multiple arms. They were known as fierce fighters, who rarely backed down from a conflict. But when they saw Sergeant Hyun's face, they hesitated. The sergeant moved forward without saying a word. His weapon was still set to stun, following standard rules for prisoner situations. But he did not fire it. Instead, he grabbed the nearest Zephyrian guard with his bare hands. What happened next made several council members gasp in shock. Sergeant Hyun lifted the alien guard, who weighed at least twice as much as he did, and threw him across the room. The Zephyrian crashed into the metal wall with enough force to dent it. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. The other human soldiers moved into the building. Private Day, who looked barely 20 years old, began freeing the chained colonists while simultaneously firing her weapon at the remaining guards. But her shots were not random. Each energy blast found gaps in the guard's armor that should have been impossible to see in the dim light and confusion of combat. The camera followed her movements as she carried 6 small children to safety, all while providing covering fire for her squad mates. She moved through the chaos like it was not there at all. Her weapon never missed its target. Her feet never stumbled. Her breathing never became labored despite carrying children who together weighed almost as much as she did. Corporal Jin was captured on another camera as he systematically destroyed the Zephyrian equipment in the building. He was not shooting, wildly or in anger. His movements were precise and methodical. He disabled each piece of technology with the minimum force needed to render it useless. But it was his face that disturbed the watching aliens the most. Jin showed no emotion at all, no anger at the suffering he had found, no satisfaction at stopping the slavers, no stress from the combat situation. His eyes were calm and focused, like someone doing routine maintenance work. The entire rescue operation took 14 minutes, Kwan narrated as the footage continued. All 47 captured colonists were recovered alive and unharmed. 0 human casualties were sustained. The Zephyrian raiding operation was completely destroyed. The hologram showed the aftermath. Human soldiers were giving medical aid to the rescued colonists, while others secured the area. Everything was done with perfect efficiency and care. The rescued people were treated gently and professionally. Representative Thol from the Corvin Empire leaned forward in his seat. His warrior instincts were fully engaged now. "This is impressive work," he said in his grinding voice. "The humans showed excellent combat effectiveness and mission focus. But I see nothing that would require a ban. They followed proper procedures and achieved their objectives." Other voices murmured agreement around the chamber. The Nexari chimed softly among themselves. The Vorthak waved their tentacles in what might have been approval. But Speaker Vextar was studying the hologram more carefully. His compound eyes could process visual information much faster than most species. "Ambassador Kwan," he said slowly, "replay the section where Sergeant Hyun enters the building. Focus on his facial expressions." The hologram rewound and played. The crucial moments again. This time the image was enlarged so everyone in the chamber could see Hyun's face clearly as he discovered the enslaved colonists. The second viewing was even more disturbing than the first. The change in the sergeant's expression was not gradual. It was instant and complete. One moment he was a disciplined soldier. The next moment, he was something that several alien species had no words to describe. "Look at his eyes," Quan said quietly. "This is what I wanted the council to see." The close-up view revealed something that made many representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Sergeant Hyun's eyes held no uncertainty, no hesitation, no moral conflict about what he was about to do. They were the eyes of someone who had stopped seeing enemies as living beings and started seeing them as problems to be solved. A representative from the peaceful Altair system spoke up, her melodic voice trembling slightly. "Ambassador, what exactly are we looking at? What changed in your soldier at that moment?" "That is what humans call righteous fury," Quan replied. "But that term does not accurately describe what you are seeing. When humans encounter deliberate cruelty toward innocence, especially toward human innocence, something in our psychology shifts. We stop seeing the perpetrators as fellow sentient beings deserving of moral consideration." The chamber was quiet now. Even the usual background noise of breathing apparatus and translation machines seemed muted. "The Zephyrian guards were no longer enemies to be defeated," Quan continued. "They became obstacles to be removed. Sergeant Hyun did not fight them. He processed them, efficiently and without emotional cost to himself. Representative Thal's 4 arms were tensed as if ready for battle. You speak as if this is a bad thing. Warriors should be focused and determined. Emotion clouds judgment in combat." "With respect," Quan said, "Sergeant Hyun was not focused and determined. He was something else entirely. Watch his vital signs during the operation." New data appeared on the hologram showing medical readouts from the sergeant's combat suit. Heart rate, blood pressure, stress hormones, brain activity patterns. All the measurements that would normally spike during intense combat. The readings were perfectly normal, not calm for a combat situation. Actually normal, as if Sergeant Hyun were sitting in his quarters reading a book. "This is impossible," whispered the Nexari representative, their crystalline form resonating with disbelief. "No warrior maintains such stable physiology during combat. Fear and aggression are natural responses that enhance combat performance." "Human. Warriors do," Quan said simply, "under certain circumstances. When we perceive innocent suffering caused by deliberate cruelty, humans enter a psychological state that has no equivalent in any other known species. We become completely calm, completely focused, and completely without moral inhibition regarding the source of that suffering." Several aliens were making notes on their personal devices. Others were communicating with their home worlds through subspace channels. The implications of what they were seeing were beginning to sink in. Speaker. Vextar raised a clawed hand for attention. "Ambassador, you mentioned 3 recordings. What do the other 2 show?" Quan's expression became even more serious. "The second recording shows what happens when humans encounter a threat to non-human innocence. The third shows what happens when we face an enemy that feeds on suffering itself." The chamber fell completely silent. Many representatives had heard stories about such enemies. The Devourers were legendary for their cruelty, but few species could face them effectively. "I want the council to understand," Quan said, "that what you have seen so far is humans operating under significant restraint. We were following your rules of war. We were using approved weapons. We were trying to minimize casualties and collateral damage." He paused, letting that statement sink in before continuing. "The next recording shows what happens when those restraints are removed." The second recording began with a view of deep space near the Arcturus Nebula. The hologram showed a fleet of 47 massive warships moving in formation toward a small agricultural world called Haven's Rest. The ships were angular and dark, bristling with weapons that could reduce a planet's surface to molten rock. "This is the Hegemony Fleet," Quan explained to the council. 3 weeks ago, they decided that Haven's Rest was in their way. The planet had no military value, no strategic resources. It was home to 2 million farmers and their families from 6 different species. The hegemony wanted to destroy it simply to send a message to other worlds. The alien representatives watched as the tactical display showed the relative positions of the fleets. The hegemony ships were enormous dreadnoughts, each one capable of fighting several smaller vessels. Against them came 12 human ships that looked tiny by comparison. Representative Thole clicked his mandibles in what might have been concern. 12 ships against 47. Even human tactical skill cannot overcome such odds. This must have been a disaster. "Watch and see," Quan replied. The recording showed the initial phase of the battle. The human ships moved in standard formation, their weapons firing regulation plasma bursts at the enemy fleet. Their communication channels were calm and professional. Everything followed the galactic rules of warfare exactly. For the first hour, it looked like any other space battle. Ships maneuvered for position. Energy shields flared as weapons found their targets. A few smaller vessels on both sides took damage and moved away from the fighting. Then something changed. The voice of Captain Bo came through the comm channel from the human flagship Indomitable. Her tone was completely calm, as if she were discussing the weather. "All units, this is Captain Bo. New orders received from Fleet Command. The hegemony has refused our offer to withdraw. They have begun targeting civilian population centers. Rules of engagement are now suspended. Repeat, rules of engagement are suspended. Weapons free. Show them what happens when you threaten farmers." What followed defied every tactical manual. In the Galactic Military Database, the human ships suddenly began moving in ways that should have been impossible. The destroyer commanded by Lieutenant Commander Nari executed a maneuver that brought her ship through a debris field at 90% light speed while rotating to bring all weapons to bear on 3 enemy vessels simultaneously. The precision required for such a move was beyond anything the Council's military experts had thought possible. The timing had to be perfect to the microsecond. The spatial calculations involved thousands of variables. Any mistake would have resulted in the ship tearing itself apart, but Nari's destroyer not only survived the maneuver, it emerged with all weapons firing. 3 hegemony cruisers were disabled in the space of 10 seconds. The Indomitable itself performed an even more impossible feat. Captain Bo ordered her ship to dive directly through the shields of a hegemony battlecruiser. The move should have destroyed both vessels. Instead, the Indomitable's reinforced bow tore through the enemy ship's hull like paper, while its weapons continued firing at point-blank range. "This cannot be real," the Nexari representative sang in harmonics of disbelief. "No organic nervous system can process spatial relationships at those speeds. The gravitational forces alone should have killed the crews." "Human nervous systems can," Quan replied, "under the right circumstances." The recording continued to show impossible maneuvers. Human pilots were pulling acceleration forces that would have turned most alien species into liquid. They were making split-second decisions that required processing more information than most species could handle in minutes. Sergeant Major Park, commanding a fighter squadron, could be heard giving orders over the comm channel while his small ship dodged between the massive guns of a hegemony dreadnought. His voice was completely steady despite the fact that he was moving fast enough to cross a continent in seconds. "Dragon Squadron, this is Park. Target their shield generators on my mark. Remember, there are kids down on that planet who want to go home tonight. Don't let them down." The fighter attack that followed was a masterpiece of coordination. 24 small ships moved as if they were parts of a single organism. They struck 47 different targets in perfect sequence, each hit timed to maximize the damage from the others. Commander Yun's corvette somehow managed to destroy a ship 10 times its size by targeting a single weak point in the enemy's armor. The shot required threading a needle through a window of opportunity that lasted less than 2 seconds. "How do they do this?" asked a representative from the floating species, their tank bubbling with agitation. "We have studied human physiology. Their reaction times are good but not superhuman. Their processing power is impressive but not beyond other species. What allows this level of performance? Quan gestured to the medical readouts appearing alongside. The tactical display. They showed the vital signs of human crew members during the battle. This is what allows it. The readings were similar to what they had seen with Sergeant Hyun, but more extreme. Heart rates were elevated but steady. Stress hormones were present but controlled. Most remarkably, brain activity showed patterns that the alien medical experts did not recognize. Human brains have a remarkable ability, Quan explained. When we perceive innocent lives in immediate danger, we can temporarily suppress the parts of our minds that deal with self-preservation, doubt, and moral complexity. We become purely focused on the problem of removing the threat. The recording showed the final moments of the battle. 47 hegemony ships had been reduced to scattered debris. The 12 human vessels were all still operational, though several showed battle damage. Casualties? Asked Speaker Vextar, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Human casualties, 0. Hegemony casualties, complete. Civilian casualties on Haven's Rest, 0. The chamber was filled with uncomfortable silence. Several representatives were checking the footage against their own military databases, trying to understand what they had witnessed. This level of tactical performance is beyond what our best strategists consider possible, Representative Thal said finally. Even accounting for superior training and technology, the coordination and precision shown here suggests abilities that border on supernatural. There is nothing supernatural about it, Quan replied. It is simply what happens when you remove a human's capacity for self-doubt and moral hesitation while maintaining their technical skills and tactical training. A representative from the cautious Rigel Confederation raised a concern. Ambassador, if humans can fight like this, why do you want us to ban you from galactic conflicts? Surely this ability would be valuable for maintaining peace. Quan's expression grew darker. Because this is not the limit of human capability in warfare. What you have seen shows humans fighting under rules of engagement that still required us to minimize casualties and preserve enemy vessels when possible. The third recording shows what happens when those final restraints are removed. He paused, looking around the chamber at the diverse collection of alien faces and features. Many showed expressions of worry or confusion. A few showed the beginning of fear. The third recording, Quan continued, shows a human military unit encountering the Devourers. The Devourers, as you know, are creatures that feed on the life force of sentient beings. They keep their victims alive for weeks while slowly draining them of everything that makes them who they are. Several representatives made sounds of disgust or horror. The Devourers were among the most feared creatures in known space. Few military forces had ever successfully fought them, and those that tried usually suffered terrible casualties. A research station was attacked by a Devourer hive ship 3 weeks ago, Quan said. 137 scientists and their families were taken. A single human unit responded to the distress call. 12 soldiers led by Major Siok. The hologram began to shift to the new recording. Several council members leaned forward despite themselves, both curious and afraid of what they were about to see. I warn the council, Quan said quietly, that this recording may be disturbing. It shows what humans become when we encounter beings that exist solely to cause suffering to others. The image resolved into the interior of a research station that had been twisted into something resembling a nightmare. Organic growths covered the walls, pulsing with sickly light. The screams of the captured scientists could be heard in the background, a constant reminder of the horror taking place. The research station had been transformed into something from a nightmare. The Devourers had grown their organic structures throughout the facility, turning clean metal corridors into twisted passages of living tissue. Pulsing veins ran along the walls, carrying nutrients extracted from the captured victims. The air itself seemed to writhe with malevolent energy. The cameras showed Major Siok's team moving through this horror with mechanical precision. But something was different about these humans compared to the previous recordings. They moved with the same efficiency as before, but there was something else in their movements now. Something that made several alien representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. The Devourers themselves were creatures of pure malice. They stood 3 meters tall on legs like twisted tree roots. Their heads were smooth and eyeless, but covered with feeding tentacles that could drain the life force from any living being. Most species who encountered them were paralyzed with terror from their psychic presence alone. But the human soldiers showed no fear at all. Private Hana was the first to encounter a devourer. The creature was feeding on a captured scientist, its tentacles wrapped around the man's head while he screamed. In agony, the alien's psychic scream should have frozen any attacking force with overwhelming terror. Instead, Hana walked up to the creature calmly and grabbed its head with her bare hands. What happened next made several council members look away. Hana began to squeeze. Slowly and methodically, she crushed the devourer's skull while it thrashed and tried to escape. The creature's psychic screams filled the station, but they had no effect on her at all. Her face showed no emotion, no strain, no satisfaction. She might have been opening a stubborn jar. The devourers have natural psychic defenses, Representative Thal observed, his warrior instincts engaged despite his discomfort. They can paralyze most species with fear. Their touch alone can drain the will to fight. How are the humans unaffected? Watch. Sergeant Moon, Quan replied, pointing to another section of the recording. Sergeant Moon was shown carrying a wounded scientist to safety while simultaneously fighting 2 devourers. But he was not simply killing them quickly as military efficiency would suggest. Instead, he was methodically disabling them, ensuring they would suffer as their victims had suffered. The sergeant used his combat knife to sever the creature's feeding tentacles one by one. He damaged their legs so they could not escape. He wounded them in ways that would cause maximum pain while keeping them alive. His movements were surgical in their precision, and his face showed the same calm expression as all the other human soldiers. Corporal. Lee was captured on another camera providing medical aid to rescued victims while using her sidearm to execute wounded devourers. She would stabilize a victim's vital signs, then turn and put a carefully aimed shot into a devourer's nerve center, back to healing, then to killing, then to healing again. Her transitions between these activities were seamless. She showed the same gentle care for the victims as she showed methodical efficiency in eliminating their tormentors. To her, there was no contradiction between these actions. "This is disturbing," the Nexari representative chimed, their crystal form darkening with unease. "Your soldiers are not simply fighting. They are engaging in deliberate torture of their enemies?" "No," Quan corrected. "They are engaging in problem-solving. The Devourers exist to cause suffering." Major Siak's team determined that the most efficient way to stop this suffering was to ensure the Devourers experienced it themselves. The recording showed Major Siak himself discovering the central feeding chamber where dozens of victims were, suspended in organic pods. The Devourers had been slowly draining them for weeks, keeping them conscious and aware throughout the process. Major Siak's response was immediate and terrifying in its calm efficiency. He moved through the chamber, like a force of nature, freeing victims while systematically destroying every devourer he encountered. But his methods were not those of a soldier in combat. They were those of an exterminator dealing with pests. He used his weapon to wound the creatures, then employed hand tools from his kit to dismantle them piece by piece. He worked with the same focused attention that a technician might use to repair complex machinery. The fact that his targets were living beings seemed not to register in his mind at all. The rescue operation took 47 minutes, Quan narrated. All 137 victims were recovered alive. 93 devourers were eliminated. Human casualties, 0. The chamber was silent except for the background hum of life support systems. Many representatives were struggling to process what they had witnessed. Your soldiers showed no signs of combat stress, Speaker Vextar observed. No elevated heart rates, no stress hormones, no psychological trauma responses. They eliminated 93 sentient beings in less than an hour and showed no emotional reaction whatsoever. That is correct, Quan confirmed. From the human perspective, they had not killed 93 sentient beings. They had removed 93 sources of innocent suffering. The distinction is important to understanding human psychology. A representative from the peaceful Altair system spoke up, her voice trembling. Ambassador, what you are describing sounds like psychopathy. The inability to recognize other beings as deserving moral consideration. It would be, Quan agreed, if humans behaved this way toward all beings. But we do not. Watch the same soldiers interacting with the rescued victims. The recording shifted to show the aftermath of the rescue. The same soldiers who had methodically dismantled the Devourers were now providing medical care and emotional support to the victims with infinite patience and gentleness. Major Siak could be seen comforting a traumatized child, his voice soft and reassuring. Private Hana was carefully treating wounds while explaining to victims that they were safe now. Sergeant Moon was helping an elderly scientist walk to the evacuation ship, supporting the man's weight while speaking to him in soothing tones. The same humans who showed no mercy to the Devourers showed unlimited compassion to their victims, Quan pointed out. This is not psychopathy. This is selective empathy taken to an extreme that most species cannot understand. The recording continued to show the human team's medical evaluations after their return to base. Dr. Young, the chief psychiatrist, conducted standard post-mission psychological screenings with each soldier. Major, I need to ask about your mental state during the mission, Dr. Young said to Major Siak in the recording. The Major's response was immediate and matter-of-fact. I felt fine, Doctor. Focused and clear-headed throughout. You eliminated 93 living beings in less than an hour. I removed threats to innocent people. The Devourers chose to cause suffering. I chose to stop them. I would make the same choice again without hesitation. Dr. Young leaned forward in her chair. Do you feel any regret about the violence? Any emotional response to what you did? Major Siak considered this question seriously. Should I feel regret? The creatures existed only to cause pain. Removing them from existence improved the universe. I find that thought satisfying rather than troubling. The recording showed similar interviews with each team member. The responses were identical. No trauma, no regret, no psychological damage from engaging in extreme violence. Complete stability despite actions that would have driven most species to madness. This is what concerns us, Quan said to the silent chamber. When humans perceive innocent suffering caused by deliberate cruelty, we do not just fight our enemies. We stop seeing them as beings deserving of moral consideration. They become problems to be solved, nothing more. He gestured to the frozen image of Major Siak's calm face during his psychological evaluation. Your rules of warfare assume that soldiers will be psychologically affected by violence, that fear, exhaustion, and moral boundaries will limit their actions. These assumptions do not apply to humans under certain conditions. Representative Thol's forearms were tense. You are saying that humans lack natural limits on violence when fighting to protect others? We are saying that those limits disappear entirely, Quan confirmed. Pain, fear, exhaustion, moral complexity, self-preservation instincts. When humans perceive innocent suffering, these constraints simply stop existing. We become something that can commit absolute violence while maintaining perfect psychological health. The implications were beginning to sink in around the chamber. Several representatives were communicating urgently with their home governments through encrypted channels. The vote on your request, Speaker Vextar said slowly, will be held tomorrow. But first I must ask, why do humans want this ban? If you possess such capabilities, surely they would be valuable for maintaining galactic peace. Quan looked around, the chamber one final time before answering. Because we understand what we become, and we believe some capabilities are too dangerous to deploy casually in civilized space. The council chamber remained silent for long minutes after the recordings ended. Representatives from 47 worlds sat in their seats, processing what they had witnessed. Some were making notes on personal devices. Others were staring at the empty hologram projector as if it might offer some explanation for what they had seen. Speaker Vexitar was the first to break the silence. His compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as he turned to face Ambassador Quan. Before we adjourn, for deliberation, the Council requires clarification on several points. Quan nodded. I will answer any questions the Council has. Representative Thol from the Corvan Empire stood, his 4 massive arms crossed over his chest. Ambassador, your species has fought alongside our forces for over a century. In all that time, we have never observed the behavior shown in these recordings. Why are we seeing them now? Because until now, humans have been fighting under strict rules of engagement designed by the Galactic Council, Quan replied. We have used approved weapons, followed standard tactics, and maintained the fiction that warfare can be civilized. The recordings show what happens when those restraints are removed or when humans encounter situations that trigger our deepest protective instincts. A representative from the floating species spoke from their green tank. You suggest that human military capability has been deliberately limited in previous conflicts? Not limited, Quan corrected. Channeled, directed, controlled. The rules of galactic warfare serve a purpose beyond minimizing casualties. They maintain psychological barriers that keep soldiers functional and societies stable. These barriers do not exist in humans when we perceive innocent suffering. The Nexari representative chimed in harmonics of confusion. But surely all species feel protective of innocence. Why do humans react so differently? Quan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Most species evolved as prey animals, or balanced predator-prey relationships. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a world where cooperation meant survival, and violence meant protection of the group. When we see innocent suffering, every instinct developed over millions of years activates simultaneously. Dr. Young approached the podium from where she had been watching in the gallery. She was an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but her expression was troubled. May I address the Council, Ambassador? Quan nodded and stepped aside. Doctor, Young took his place at the podium. Honored members, she began. I am Dr. Young, Chief Psychiatrist for the Human Federation Military. I have studied the psychological effects of combat on human soldiers for 30 years. What you have seen in these recordings represents a fundamental aspect of human psychology that we are only beginning to understand. She activated a new display showing brain scans and psychological profiles. When humans encounter innocent suffering caused by deliberate cruelty, our brains undergo measurable changes. Regions associated with empathy and moral reasoning remain fully active for victims, but these same regions essentially shut down when processing information about the perpetrators. The scans showed before and after images of human brain activity. The difference was dramatic. Areas that normally glowed with activity went dark while others became hyperactive. The result, Dr. Young continued, is a human who can show infinite compassion for victims while viewing their tormentors as non-entities. Objects to be removed rather than beings to be defeated. Representative Thal leaned forward. Doctor, you speak as if this is involuntary. Surely your soldiers can choose to maintain normal moral responses. To some extent, yes, Dr. Young agreed. But the psychological pressure is enormous. Asking a human to maintain moral complexity toward someone torturing innocence is like asking you to ignore pain while being burned alive. Possible, but requiring tremendous effort and causing significant psychological damage. She showed more data on the hologram. We have documented cases of human soldiers who forced themselves to maintain standard moral responses during rescue. operations. Without exception, they suffered severe psychological trauma afterward: depression, anxiety, inability to function in normal society. But the soldiers in the recordings showed no such trauma, Speaker Vextar observed. Exactly, Dr. Young confirmed, because they allowed their psychology to function naturally. They protected innocence by removing threats efficiently and without moral conflict. From their perspective, they had done good work in service of a worthy cause. The implications were sinking in around the chamber. Several representatives were looking distinctly uncomfortable. A representative from the peaceful Altair system asked, "Doctor, are you saying that humans are incapable of civilized warfare when innocents are involved?" "I am saying that human concepts of civilized behavior do not include showing mercy to those who deliberately torture innocents," Dr. Young replied. "We can follow rules of engagement when fighting soldiers or defending territory. But when we encounter deliberate cruelty toward the helpless, our psychology shifts into what you might call extermination mode." Quan returned to the podium. "This is why we request the ban, not because we are ashamed of protecting innocents, but because we understand that our methods are incompatible with galactic civilization." "Explain," Speaker Vextar commanded. "Your rules of warfare are designed to maintain the fiction that violence can be controlled, limited, and civilized," Quan said. "They assume that soldiers will be constrained by fear, exhaustion, moral complexity, and self-preservation. These assumptions allow for negotiated surrenders, prisoner exchanges, and eventual peace treaties." He gestured to the empty hologram projector. "Humans operating without restraints do not negotiate. We do not take prisoners. We do not become exhausted or afraid. We solve problems permanently and efficiently. There is no place for such methods in civilized space." Representative Thal's warrior instincts were fully engaged, but surely such capabilities would be valuable against truly evil enemies. The devourers, for instance, or other species that exist only to cause suffering. "Perhaps," Quan agreed, "but consider the cost. Once you normalize the use of humans in extermination mode, how do you control when and where such methods are applied? How do you prevent mission creep from emergency use to standard operating procedure?" Dr. Young added, "There is also the question of what such normalization would do to human society. The soldiers in the recordings were psychologically healthy because they viewed their actions as justified protection of innocence. But if such actions became routine, humans might begin to view violence as the default solution to moral problems." The chamber fell silent again as representatives considered these implications. The idea of an entire species that could commit unlimited violence while maintaining psychological stability was terrifying to contemplate. Speaker Vextar stood slowly. "The Council will recess for deliberation. We will reconvene tomorrow for the vote on the Human Federation's request for military restriction." As the session ended, representatives began filing out of the chamber in subdued groups. Many were still discussing what they had witnessed. Others were making urgent communications to their home governments. Quan remained at the podium as the chamber emptied. Dr. Young approached him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think they understood?" she asked quietly. Quan watched the last few aliens leave through the chamber's massive doors. They understood that when you give humans permission to remove moral constraints in warfare, you do not create better soldiers. You create something that should not be allowed to exist in civilized space. And if they vote against the ban anyway? If they decide they need us despite the risks? Quan was quiet for a long moment. "Then they will call us when something threatens the galaxy that only humans can stop. And we will answer. Because despite everything, that is what we are. Even knowing what it might cost, especially knowing what it might cost." Quan looked at his hands, remembering things he preferred not to think about. The galaxy should be protected by those who can be trusted with power. But sometimes it needs to be protected by those who cannot. The next day, The vote was unanimous. Every species in the Galactic Council voted to ban human military involvement in galactic conflicts. The official reason given was concern for maintaining civilized standards of warfare. The real reason was never stated publicly, but it was understood by all who had seen the recordings. Some capabilities were too dangerous to use, even when they were effective. Some solutions created problems worse than the original crisis. And some species were too powerful to be trusted with their own nature. As Quan prepared to return to Earth with news of the ban, he reflected on what it meant for humanity's place in the galaxy. They would still be welcome as traders, diplomats, scientists, and explorers. But when civilized space needed protection, they would have to find other methods. Unless, of course, civilization itself was threatened by something that could only be stopped by humans being exactly what they were. In that case, the galaxy would call and humanity would answer.